Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
You know that feeling when someone shows up for you just when you need it most? That's what Uber is all about. Not just a ride or dinner at your door. It's how Uber helps you show up for the moments that matter. Because showing up can turn a tough day around or make a good one even better. Whatever it is, big or small, Uber is on the way. So you can be on yours. Uber, on our way.
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. As you can tell, Kieran, I was doing a bit more shouting last night. I went to the fan zone beforehand. It's 100 yards from the club shop to the fan zone. It took me 25 minutes to get there.
Brilliant.
It was just lovely. How are you, Kieran? Good win for your boys the other night as well.
Good. Yeah. I'm okay. I'm a man of routine, as I suspect many people have gathered. So I always have an 11 o'clock Marmite sandwich and a glass of milk.
Yeah.
But being colourblind, I didn't realise that I'd picked up a bottle of red milk, i.e. completely skimmed, which is effectively water with a bit of chalk dust added to it, instead of my regular semi-skim. So I'm traumatised by the event.
The mere thought of milk traumatises me. I have a tiny splash of tea, but I can't drink milk.
My God.
No, because I'm sure I've told you this before, because when I was 6 years of age on a school trip to Devon, a farmer thought it'd be hilarious to pick on one of the city kids to drink milk straight from the cow's udder, which made me violently sick because it was hot and it was, also the cow's udder was dangerously close to my mouth, which is a South London boy. It was not something you expect on that. It's amazing the sort of things that traumatise you. Very nice to see you wearing a Dukla Prague away kit, Kieran.
Well, I thought in honour of Crystal Palace getting into Europe, this could be the type of place that you'll be visiting next year.
Absolutely. Well, I saw them play in November last year. Bohemia Prague against Dukla in a local derby at which there were 64 Dukla fans. It was fantastic. I want to go. Young boys burn. That's where I want to go. That's just. I know in us we'll get 7 teams east of Moscow. But, I can't wait.
There's a book to be written there, Kevin, if you do, to be fair.
Oh, blimey, that's a good point, yeah. I wonder if anyone's ever done that before. A football fan's journey around several... Yes, it's about 1,500 of those, aren't there? We have a new benefit, Kieran. Before we start, we've got a new benefit to announce for our Price of Football Club members. Actually, the best benefit would be an intro with no wittering. I mean, more people would sign up for that. From this week, club members will get each episode as soon as it's ready, rather than having to wait until first thing Tuesday for our weekly questions episode or first thing Thursday for our weekly news episode. We usually record each episode the day before it goes out, sometimes the day before that. So if you join the Price of Football Club, you'll get each episode the day before everyone else. And you can do that by going to priceoffootball.com to join the club. Now, it's Newsday, Kieran, but I have a question for you to start. Obviously, even the biggest of Crystal Palace oysters has the occasional bit of grit in it. The rumour started going around last night, not helped by slightly doom-laden article in The Athletic this morning saying that Palace's participation in Europe could be in danger if Lyon also qualify.
Well, this is a possible, but certainly not probable. John Textor is the largest single shareholder in Crystal Palace at 45%. But when it comes to making decisions, he has one vote, as does Steve Parish, as does Donner and Blitzen, whatever they're called. So therefore, he is not able to control Crystal Palace Football Club, in my opinion. And whilst there's normally a 30% threshold above which UEFA tend to get their knickers in a twist, because of the control arrangement, in the sense that his voice can be heard, but he can easily be outvoted. And remember, Steve Parish also has the casting vote, even if it's a 2v2 decision. I don't see this as being an issue. Now, if John Textor was being a nice guy, what I would expect he'd do, in order to placate any concerns of Palace fans and to have extremely untroubled waters, what he could do is replicate what Mr. Marinakis did at Nottingham Forest and effectively put his shares into a trust. My only reservation, and it is and I don't think he will press this button, because if he does, I suspect his life wouldn't be worth living. He could use this issue as a negotiating tactic in trying to negotiate a better price for his shares if he's trying to make a divestment, and say, well, if you don't pay the amount of money that I'm looking for, I'm going to carry on with my 45% ownership of the shares, and therefore this could result in Crystal Palace. But I don't think that would work for the reasons that I've already given. And secondly, I'm not his biggest fan, but I don't think even he would be that malevolent. And this would be an act of malevolence and nothing else, should he go down that route. So A, I don't think it would work. And B, for all the reservations you might have on John Textor, to deny, or even to attempt to deny, and I don't think he'd get very far down that road, to attempt to deny the club its rightful place in European football next season is a step too far.
Well, also, surely Palace being in Europe will raise the value of the club and therefore his share in it, won't it? Exactly.
Yeah. So it's punching yourself in the face.
Yeah.
But never underestimate, as we've seen on a more global scale, when it comes to people voting for certain issues, the ability of people to go, yeah, this is actually bad for me, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah. It's, well, talking of bad, Kieran, it's been a bad season for Leicester City. There's no doubt about it. And there's a little bit of extra salt rubbed in the wounds this week.
There is, and this is a bit of a funny one on a series of levels. And the reason why I say that is that on Tuesday at, I think it was 11 a.m, an announcement came from the Premier League. And this was to say that they are going to charge Leicester City with an alleged breach of PSR for non-submission or delayed submission of financial data to the Premier League, which you're supposed to do by the 31st of December 2024 for the 23-24 season. I think Leicester went down the route of, well, we weren't part of the Premier League in 23-24, so therefore we don't have to. And general sort of non-cooperation consequences. So that came out yesterday, and we are now talking the 20th of May. 20th of May 2025. So it's taken a long time to get that far. We are aware that both the Premier League and the EFL have made changes to their own internal constitutions to make it easier to charge clubs in the acts of promotion and relegation. But there was some other stuff as well. There was a commission that was heard. First of all, the commission ruled in favour of Leicester City. The Premier League tried to charge Leicester City for a breach of the PSR rules for 22-23 when the club was relegated. Our very good friend Nick DeMarco pointed out that if you take a look at the Premier League's own constitution, Leicester City had transferred their shares to the EFL by the 30th of June, and therefore they weren't part of the Premier League, and the Premier League went, yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to say the Premier League's been licking its wounds ever since. So what they're doing instead is they're charging Leicester City with a breach of the rules for the 3 years ended the 30th of June 2024, i.e. when Leicester City were actually in the EFL. Now, under these new changes of rules to both constitutions, that would appear to be a valid thing or an opportunity which would be part of the Premier League's own rulebook and also wouldn't breach the EFL rulebook. So why are they doing this, given that Leicester City have been relegated? Well, I think it's sort of two or threefold. First of all, they want to lay down a marker. This is how we're going to do things in future. So therefore, if there are clubs who are being promoted from the EFL, you can still be charged by the Premier League. Secondly, it does have an obligation towards all shareholders and all members. And you might say, well, who cares if Leicester City are charged, even if they are found guilty and they subsequently get a points deduction? Well, Leicester City finished 18th in the Premier League. Now, a substantial points deduction could mean that they would therefore fall into 19th place or 20th place. And given that each position in the Premier League is worth £3.5 million in prize money, if I was Southampton Football Club or if I was Ipswich Town Football Club, I've therefore got a vested interest and a rightful interest in saying, well, this case needs to be heard. Will a Premier League points deduction have an impact upon Leicester City for the next season in the Championship? My understanding is that's not the case. So whilst there is greater cooperation between the Premier League and the EFL, what the Premier League cannot do is to say, you're going to have a 12 points deduction and it's going to apply next season in the Championship itself. So that's the position as far as the Premier League is concerned. What about the EFL? Well, we've heard nothing. Now, we've had this discussion on the show before that should Leicester City be relegated, I think it's fair to say the EFL, who, again, a bit miffed that Leicester City, due to, I would say, a softening, a weak formulation of clauses in the EFL's own rulebook at the time, once again it's been tightened up, were unable to prosecute Leicester City in the form of having a transfer embargo and making sure that they adhere to a very strict budget in season 23-24, the season they were in the Championship and got promoted. That would not be the case for the forthcoming season. So it could be that the EFL will say, based on your figures, you need to show us a budget. If we think you're going to breach the rules, then we can impose sanctions on you effectively in advance. And then at a later point in the season, when Leicester City actually publish their financial statements, it could mean that there will be further issues to deal with in the form of a commission. What we've not seen, Leicester City might sell 2 or 3 players between now and the end of June, and its finances improve. So that's where we are. It's a partial victory for Leicester City. It's the Premier League trying once again to say that we're very capable of looking after ourselves. There's still lobbying taking place for issues to do with the regulator. And also it does have this broader obligation towards all of its members to adhere to its own rule book, especially given that its own rule book has only just recently changed.
When you say, Kieran, that the no Premier League points deduction can happen when they're in the Championship, does that imply that a financial penalty could happen when they're in the Championship, or does that mean that the Premier League will wait until Leicester City are promoted again and then take the points off them?
No, if it decides to hold a commission and the commission rules that there should be a financial sanction, that would be applied in the Championship. Ironically, when Leicester were promoted, I think they were promoted in 2014, there were some very unusual activities taking place for Leicester City's sponsorship. And as a consequence to that, Leicester City were fined by the EFL for a breach of PSR, as were Bournemouth, by the way, when they were promoted. And the ruling that exists, the Premier League and the EFL don't like each other because of this ongoing issue to do with distribution. But just like all institutions, there are still lines of communication. They are still working together on some issues. So the EFL did effectively impose a fine, and what the Premier League did was said, right, we're going to take this money away from your TV revenues and we're going to hand it over to the EFL as part of the sanctioning process.
And this hadn't quite happened, Kieran, when we recorded the last pod. But finally, Reading fans, we can cross the T's, dot the I's, and pop the corks.
That's right, yes. It's now all been formalised. Reading Football Club have formally announced a completion of the sale of the club from Di Yonga to Rob Cohig's relatively recently formed company, Redwood Holdings. So there is new ownership. The club now has to adhere to any requests from the EFL in terms of its behaviour, but I don't see that being an issue. And I think Reading fans can do something. And let's face it, we've both been in this situation ourselves of going to bed at night knowing that you've got a football club there in the morning. And actually, if you go for those people that have not been through that experience, it is genuinely unpleasant. And it does occupy too many of your thoughts in a single 24-hour period, I can assure you.
It won't surprise you to learn, Kieran, that I spent a lot of Sunday with the radio on, 5 Live, because of the obvious reason. Also, anxious to find out how Macclesfield had been getting on, because Robbie Savage hadn't mentioned it for several minutes. Apparently, they've done very well because of it.
He signed a new contract as well.
Yeah, of course he has. I imagine he had a photograph taken while he did it. No, Robbie. But obviously, it meant I got to hear Chelsea women completing the domestic treble. But also on the pitch, immediately afterwards, even better news announced on the pitch by what sounded like a very nice young man.
Yes, this is Alexis Ohanian. I think he is the husband of Serena Williams.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. He is a tech guru, I think is the phrase. If people ever used the app Reddit, I've never quite worked out what Reddit is, but it's a fascinating wormhole to go into.
I think, Kieran, you'll find it's mainly middle-aged men waffling on about various things and contradicting each other, which is why it'd be right down our street.
Yes. Yes, I might pop down it because I've got a slight problem with the leaking cistern in our toilets. So what I'm going to do is put a photograph of my leaking cistern and say, given that all of the plumbers in this country, they don't answer their phones or they've gone back to Poland, I'm trying to solve this myself. So I'll see if Reddit can solve my leaking cistern issue. So he has bought 8% of Chelsea Women's Football Club for £20 million. So if you gross that up, that values Chelsea Women's Football Club at £240 million.
Yeah, that's handy, isn't it?
That's handy.
Yeah.
Now you almost sounded cynical, and I'd just be chastening you as far as that is concerned, because I'm not a cynic.
Oh no. Yeah.
I say, oh right, an American investor has come to the rescue of an American investor, when lots of people were querying the valuation of Chelsea Football Club when it was sold by Chelsea FC Holdings to Blue Sky, or whatever it's called, not Blue Sky, by Blueco. which valued the club at £200 million and also generated a profit of £198 million for Chelsea FC Holdings, which meant that they weren't in danger of breaching profitability and sustainability rules. And that valuation has been queried by many people, myself included. If you look at the comments made by Alexis Ohanian, he said, the sky's the limit for women's football. And I genuinely hope he's right. But the evidence does not back that up. If you take a look at the crowds that Chelsea women's team have been getting for league matches at Kingsmeadow, 2,000 to 4,000 people are turning up. Now, look, when they've been to Stamford Bridge, they're getting 20,000. So, is there a broader issue? Should the owners been trying to find them a bespoke stadium, which is a lot easier to access, because Kingsmeadow is an absolute pain in the butt to get to and get out of? In my view, they should. But again, they paid money for this stadium. If you are losing £1 for every £1 that you generate, then yes, the sky might be the limit, but paying £240 million for a business under those circumstances, or valuing the business at £240 million, seems inconsistent with all traditional valuation methods that I would use, that somebody else would use. I'm not saying that we're right and Mr. Ohanian is wrong, because at the end of the day, he's a billionaire and I'm a teacher. So, have I got the right to say? Well, I've got the right to say it, and it doesn't mean I am right in my conclusions. I think the cynical view is one of, this is a very convenient transaction for Chelsea's current owners. And even if the Premier League says, £240 million, that is probably pushing it a bit. But the £200 million that you quoted, perhaps that's not as bad after all. So I'm unconvinced as to the logic behind the calculations. But it doesn't matter what you or I think, Kevin. It's what the Premier League thinks. It also makes you wonder how UEFA are going to respond to this. But for all Chelsea fans who are anxiously getting their calculators out and working out what they have to do this weekend in terms of qualifying for the Champions League, even if you have breached UEFA's rules, the chances are all you're going to do is to get a fine. And if we take a look at the fines, I think they reached the conclusion that Barcelona was about €200 million over the PSR limit, and they fined them €500,000. So if that's going to be the approach taken, then the rules, certainly for a first-time offender, are going to be so minuscule as to not act as any form of deterrent.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout, the one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
To be fair to Mr. Ohanian, he talked a good fight. He did clearly, not even imply, he stated that he would be investing a lot more money into Chelsea women's team in the future. So if he does that, all good. So we'll keep an eye on that. Here's an interesting one, Kieran, involving 4 or 5, I think, Premier League clubs whose shirt sponsor is facing an uncertain future next season.
Yes, this is because TGP Europe, who they've been commented upon on the price of football on a few occasions before, they were given a £3 million fine by the Gambling Commission, and this was for breaches of anti-money laundering transactions. As a result of which, they've effectively closed down their European operation. They were operating from that bastion of transparency, the Isle of Man, and it's therefore had to move away. But I think there are some issues arising for Newcastle, Fulham, Wolverhampton Wanderers, Burnley, and Bournemouth, because as far as the Gambling Commission is concerned, these football clubs should have done due diligence before agreeing to sign up with these gambling operations who you cannot remember for about more. If I was asked to name the sponsors, it will probably involve the number 8 because it's an Asian-facing flag of convenience or white label organization, and we know that the number 8 is a lucky number in Chinese heritage. So it's left the market, but if these football clubs have done insufficient due diligence, then they could be deemed to have been negligent in their behaviour. And if fans of these clubs from the UK have been able to access the websites of these gambling sponsors because they're not licensed in the UK, then there could be complications and ramifications for the clubs. Now, it will almost certainly be a modest fine, but it won't look good should the Gambling Commission, which fair play, as a regulator and an independent regulator, appears to be doing a reasonable job in trying to hold some of these gambling parties to account.
I only saw Wolves play 12 hours ago, and I can't remember for the life of me what was on the front of their shirt. I remember Bournemouth's because I've got a schoolboy sense of humour.
Yes.
Obviously. So just to clarify for listeners, so TGP Europe are kind of the label under which these gambling companies operate in the first place, were they?
That's right. So what TGP Europe do is they obtain a license for these organisations to operate in the UK. Now, in theory, that means that they can set up a UK-facing website. If you take a look at the UK-facing websites, and I gamble, you gamble. So we have to reiterate, we are not anti-gambling. You'd look at it and you say, well, it's a bit crap. And it looks untouched, and it looks real. It's not something that would encourage engagement, but they did exist, and in my view, I think they were there as placeholders rather than as genuine attempts to engage with the UK gambling customer base. But I think they would have to be now removed because they have no license to apply their services in the UK. So if the clubs have not followed that up, the clubs could be guilty by association and so on.
2 clubs getting substantial cash injections, Kieran, Leeds and Preston. Leeds substantially more substantial, if that's the phrase. They're getting £120 million.
That's right. It looks like 49ers Investments, the enterprise arm, 49ers Enterprises, the investment arm of San Francisco 49ers, are putting in £120 million worth of new shares. Leeds United have just been promoted. Congratulations to them. What is this money going to be used for? Now, there are 2 potential viewpoints, or 3 actually. 1, working capital, i.e. keeping the lights on, because as we know, clubs are operating at a loss. Leeds made a substantial loss in season 23-24 when they were in the championship for the first season. They've just been promoted, so therefore there'll be substantial bonuses having to be paid as far as this season is concerned. So one expects significant losses to have been made as well, although they've been quite successful in terms of selling players. As far as Leeds fans are concerned, is this money going into the war chest. Because that's how it's officially described, isn't it?
Yes. Especially in Newcastle.
If you take a look at the PSR rules, clubs are actually only allowed to lose £15 million over 3 years. But if the owner puts money in, then that loss can be increased to 105. And I think this is something which actually bypasses quite a few fans. It also seems to bypass the Premier League as well in terms of a logical interpretation of its own rulebook. But that's a separate issue. So this money does allow Leeds to lose more money over that 3-year period. But more importantly, it gives Leeds physical cash. When Leeds were relegated, I think from the Premier League, they owed somewhere in the region of 170 to 180 million pounds in unpaid transfer fees, which that creates a blockage from a cash point of view. So this injection will certainly help that. We have seen the plans to expand and redevelop Elland Road Stadium with a view to increasing capacity to over 50,000. So that will be a contributory element here in getting that project off the road, though. And what you find very quickly is that £100 million doesn't go as far as it used to. We saw both Ipswich Town and Southampton spend £100 million in the transfer market last June and July, and that didn't allow them to maintain a position as far as Premier League was concerned. But Leeds, as we know, big fan base, big crowd, big brand, big cash coming in. It will certainly assist them as far as their negotiations for playing talent is concerned this summer.
Did you ever think in your lifetime you'd utter the phrase £100 million doesn't go as far as it used to?
No. And that is a crazy thing, because doing this show with you and the broader analytical work, you do become completely immune to what under normal business circumstances would be deemed to be something crazy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering now how many Mivies I could buy with £100 million compared to 1975. And as we said, Kieran, Preston also getting a cash sum, not nearly as much.
Not nearly as much, but if you take a look at the model that's employed at Preston North End, what we are seeing is that the Hemmings family, and I'm making an assumption that it is the Hemmings family on the basis of historic transactions, are every sort of 6 weeks to 2 months, they're putting in a substantial amount of money into the club. But the good news for Preston fans is that they're putting it into the club in the form of shares, and therefore it never has to be repaid. And Preston are a fine club, and you or I are old enough to remember the history and the success of Preston. When we were growing up as kids, and we used to watch the FA Cup final as kids, and you'd see it all the black and white shows and so on. So we know that Preston North End has a magnificent history and heritage, but it's still losing £10 million a year. And what we are seeing, as far as the owners are concerned, is that they're putting in that £1 million, 700,000 here, whatever it's needed to do. And why are they doing that? It's there to keep the lights on. This is money from the shareholders for working capital purposes.
I don't think many people could disagree with me, Kieran, that Preston North End has the finest football statue outside. The Splash statue is a sculpture of Tom Finney in a puddle in his pomp. It's just the most amazing piece of sculpture, full stop, as a football fan. QPR, in a kind of backhanded way, have also had a sort of injection of funds as well, haven't they?
Yes, and I think this is an injection of realism as well. Whilst it's not funds in terms of cash, what we do see from many owners is that they lend money to the football club. Now, in the case of QPR, I think these loans have been at low or no interest rates. Some of the other owners, perhaps not quite as honourable. And we've used this phrase in respect of many clubs on many an occasion, in describing them as the bank of mum and dad, i.e. the owner puts money into the club. The owner knows that the club will never be in a position to be able to repay those loans. The club knows it will never be in a position, but we just keep the pretense. And I always give the example of lending money to your kid to buy their first car. It's your kid. You've got that relationship, which isn't a financial. Kids are not a good financial investment. It's not a good financial investment, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not a qualified financial analyst, but to take it from all parents, that's not a good thing. But there's an emotional investment, and the emotional return far exceeds the financial cost. I am speaking like an accountant.
Accountant dad, yes, you are.
Accountant dad. Yeah, as opposed to airport dad, the Icelandic band that I went to see.
Yeah.
So what they've done is that they've said, look, we're going to write off £13.5 million worth of loans. We ain't going to get it back. If we do sell the club, we'll get some money back then, and we'll deal with that then. But as far as any prospective new owners are concerned, and this is just as important as what's happening to the club itself, should they move to a position where they're looking to sell the club, they won't be having to repay those outstanding debts.
And our penultimate story, Kieran, takes us to Paraguay, I believe, for the very first time. Yes. We're not actually talking about Paraguayan football. We're talking about a commotion, a kerfuffle at the FIFA annual Congress, which was held in Paraguay last week.
It was held in Paraguay, and the delegates turned up. Now, it is an important event. There are significant decisions to be made in terms of the number of countries qualifying for the World Cup in future competitions. We've got the fact that the World Cup is coming to England, the Women's World Cup in 2035. How many teams for that? Are there going to be issues in terms of pricing of tickets for the World Cup? And I did see a story just before we started recording the show, is that it looks like FIFA are going to be applying dynamic pricing.
Are they?
I.e., what does that mean for people unfamiliar with dynamic pricing? FIFA would say it's the law of supply and demand. I think in the view of many football fans, it's pricing out traditional football fans to maximise revenues and to replace the passion and the love of fans for their country's football teams with a series of more wealthy people who want to be seen there because they're influencers, because they're YouTubers, because they want to be seen to be seen, and so on. So there aren't major affairs of state as far as FIFA are concerned. So therefore, one would anticipate that FIFA's most high-profile individual, President Gianni Infantino, would have this as a priority. He didn't turn up on time. He said, initially, I'm going to be late because I want to be seen chatting to Donald Trump. President Trump is in the Middle East. He is involved in various negotiations with the countries there, and we're fully aware of that. Infantino will have justified his decision by saying, look, I'm there to try to persuade Donald Trump that the security costs at next year's World Cup should be borne by the US federal government rather than individual cities, and certainly not by FIFA. Yeah, that's the most important thing. So therefore, that was his justification. It then turns out that his plane was late, and then later still, and later still. So this resulted in I don't know what Paraguayan is for hissy fit, but there was one from the European delegates. They did a walkout. Yeah. They went and sulked. They went and went onto their WhatsApp. They checked how they were getting on Wordle or whatever they do whilst you're having a hissy fit, as a token protest at Infantino's behaviour. But the trouble is, when you have people who are effectively kings as opposed to presidents, they act as if they can rule by decree and ignore what many would deem to be legitimate concerns about FIFA's operations.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
They weren't the only ones sulking. I should think Trump and Infantino, they're both still sulking they weren't made new pope. Essentially,
yes.
both of them would have thought they were in the running for that. Our final story, Kieran, takes us to Italy, and it's almost a terrible cliche throwback Italian-style corruption story, isn't it?
Yeah. Leeds fans, I bet you've been wondering what's happened to former owner Massimo Cellino. He was the guy that was superstitious.
Yeah.
I think it was about was it the number 14?
The 14, and the
yeah.
colour purple.
He was also colour purple. Yeah. So various wacky things ended up taking place there. At Leeds United, there was a fight between Cellino and the EFL in terms of Sky and so on. So all of these crazy, nonsensical things taking place. But he was always good copy. It was a shame that the price of football was not being recorded in those days. Yeah. He would have given us, Leeds United fans would have been sick and tired of appearing on the show in a very similar way to the likes of Reading fans. Yeah. He is now the owner of Serie B Brescia. And it turns out that in Italian football, they have playoffs for relegation. I think playoffs for relegation is a really
great idea. Yeah.
Now, I think you don't want loads of dead rubbers at the end of the season. This is one way of extending the tendrils of jeopardy as far as football is concerned. But by all accounts, Sampdoria. Yeah, you and I. I think Sampdoria. I think massive club.
Brilliant kit.
One of the greatest shirts of all time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So they were due to be relegated to the third tier, but they might be reprieved because there's been some irregular payments as far as payroll is concerned. And if upheld, it could mean that Brescia are subject to a 4-point deduction by the Italian football police, for want of a better phrase. And therefore, as a consequence of this, the relegation playoffs have not yet been conducted because you don't know who is in the frame for it. So it does have that transcendence between non-footballing issues and footballing issues. And this is sort of a broader concern. Whilst for us this is a bit of a. It's not like the final story at the News of 10 about the skateboarding hamster or whatever it is, but it's not far away from it. Yeah. But if this could also apply to English football in due course, and that's my concern, that whilst there is a culture at some clubs of we see rules as something which is a challenge to get around, to circumvent, and so on, which results in more and more investigations and more legal disputes. We don't want matches to be going into. We don't want the football to be going into final matches with unheard issues, and that brings us back, of course, to Manchester City. We've got 5 clubs trying to get 3 Champions League places, but there's been no white smoke coming from the Commission into the 115 charges. If that's decided in August or September, you think about the clubs which are, Manchester City have got a 99% chance of qualifying for the Champions League, but if somebody's going to miss out if City are found guilty. And remember, innocent and found, we've got this thing called habeas corpus, still just, although it is being removed in the United States, I believe, which is a broader discussion issue. But Manchester City are currently, but should they be found guilty and should there be a points deduction applied? Some clubs will say that should have been applied in season 24-25 and so on. So it's a sign of the times more than anything else.
Well, the fact that the white smoke, as you say, hasn't arisen yet plays into the hands of those conspiracy theorists who think, well, that means that the City have been cleared of all charges. And that because if they hadn't been, then surely they would have had to do it this season. So, but again, because we don't know any information, we speculate. It's such a shame to hear that Sampdoria could be going into the third tier of Italian football, because it's impossible to explain to younger listeners how cool Italian football was. Channel 4 had a great deal to play in that part, but Italian football was just astonishingly cool. At a time when English football was the opposite of cool, Italian football was cool. And some of the dark arts of Italian football, what made it cool, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, you weren't getting 4-4 draws, let's face it, but it's still the kits, the stadiums, they were just fantastic. Anyway, don't forget, as I said at the start, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you'll get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, early access to the show, many, many more. Benefits, just go to priceoffootball.com and click on Join the Club to sign up today. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, on our regular Tuesday pod, then email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And don't forget, you can follow us on X, Twitter, and find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on the same website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Tuesday. We've got an interview tomorrow, haven't we? We have with Niall Cooper from Fair Game. Very good interview. That's tomorrow. But we'll be back on Tuesday with our questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you as always, folks, and thank you for all the sympathy that's been coming my way, and also all the love. I've had some brilliant chats, mainly with Palace fans. To be fair, and we're having a bit of a loving.
Several people asked about you last night, including two people, rather bizarrely, who didn't know we did a pod together. They actually asked if I knew you. I've heard of him. The tall fella doesn't drink. That's him. Yeah.
And the weird one. So last night, by the way, I went to the premiere.
Oh, how was it?
Of a film. It was a film called Crossing the Line.
Yeah.
And it's about it's about fraud in football. It's a sort of one of those sort of training films, but actually, we were going, he was in EastEnders, he was in Game of Thrones. So we're looking at so that they were, it wasn't sort of a wooden bunch of people from a company who were saying, these are the lines we have been told to read. It was with genuine pathos and believable and sympathetic characters and so on. So it was a good film to watch, and there was plenty of food for thought. It was based on the semi-demise of a former club owner, and I'll tell you that club owner is after the show.
Oh, okay.
And so on. I had to give a sort of a summary speech at the end of it. I go, I don't really know what to say on these things, but it was good fun and lots of people there. But it did mean that the Baroness was able to walk on the red carpet for the first time. She was absolutely made up.
Oh my lord!
We've not seen a lot of her recently, so I'm trying to get into the good books. And also the Baroness had an operation on her eye a couple of weeks ago, which has meant two things. First of all, she's not been allowed to drive the car, which is quite restrictive. But more importantly than that, for the Baroness, who's a woman who takes her appearance very seriously, she's not been able to wear makeup. And she was still banned from being allowed to wear makeup. And she decided to be a scab. She decided to be a ban breaker. She says, "There's no way I'm going on a red carpet unless I'm fully made up." So she was made up on that. So yes, it was good fun. And why am I rambling about this? Well, if you want to support the show, Price of Football Club's one way of doing so. If you want to support the club in an alternative method, you can do that by giving us a review. And it doesn't matter what you say. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by Dean Gaffney, ex of EastEnders, and Ted Rogers of 321.
The most baffling game show in the history of TV.
Never made sense whatsoever.
Nor did Dean Gaffney, to be perfectly honest. But I'm going to point this out, Kieran, as our listeners need to know this. It was me that said to the Baroness what you should have blinking said to her when she told me about this, because it was me that said, you don't need makeup. That's not a problem for you at all, Baroness. And I said, I'm sure Kieran said that to you, which you know. But well done for getting the Baroness on the red carpet. I'd love to have seen that. That's fantastic. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.